Hey, I'm Brian Norman, speaking here at First AG Church of Inverness, Florida, and the title of this short devotional is How to Find Peace in the Storm. How to Find Peace in the Storm. Hey, are you worried right now about anything? Anything you're afraid about that you think might be harmful to you or your family or your very lives? Well, you're not the only one. A lot of people feel that way, and a lot of people have felt that way throughout the ages. Even followers of Jesus felt that way. I'm thinking of the story in Mark chapter 4 where the disciples, those are of course followers of Jesus, were with him in a boat, and they were afraid. This is in Mark chapter 4, beginning at verse 35. The story goes, "On the same day when evening had come, Jesus said to them, 'Let us cross over to the other side of the lake.' Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that it was already filling. But he, Jesus, was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?'" So here's the scene. They're in a boat, they're on a lake, they thought everything was fine, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, a cataclysm came that they were not expecting. Does that sound familiar to what we're going through right now? Something that nobody anticipated was going to happen was happening, and it was scaring the daylights out of them. They thought they were going to lose their jobs. I mean, remember, they were fishermen. They relied on this boat to catch not only food for their families to eat, but as a commodity for them to trade with other people so they could get other goods for their households. That was their livelihood. Losing that boat would be like you losing your car, so you couldn't get to work. They were going to lose their boat, their livelihood, maybe even their lives from this thing going on that they did not anticipate happening to them. There was a storm around them, and they were terrified. Well, that was how they felt. Maybe that's how you feel right now. How did Jesus answer them? Well, he sort of didn't answer them, at least not the way they were expecting him to answer. They woke him up, and then as soon as he awakened, verses 39 and 40, it says, "Then Jesus arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, 'Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?'" So why didn't he answer their question? I think the reason is because their question to him, "Don't you care that we're about to die?" was simply the wrong question, really kind of a bad question, because A, he knew they weren't going to die, and they didn't die, and B, because of course he cares. He's Jesus. That's why he was there in the first place. He is the Son of God who's been ever existent and ever eternal. He chose to put on flesh and come down into the earth precisely because he does care about their very lives, about their eternal lives. And for them to ask such a question of Jesus, "Don't you even care?" really indicated that they did not truly know who Jesus was and is. So we can know, and to be fair to the disciples, they had not seen and read everything that we have since that time. However, we have more revelation that they didn't have. We have, for instance, Colossians chapter 3, who tells us, Colossians chapter 1, which tells us a whole lot about who Jesus is. It says, starting in verse 9 of Colossians 1, "For this reason," I'm saying this wrong. Verse 15, Colossians 1:15 is actually where we're at. "The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation." This is talking about Jesus before he put on flesh even. "For by him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether they are kings, lords, rulers, or powers. All things have been created through him and for him. He himself existed before anything else did, and he holds all things together. He is also the head of the body, which is the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself might have the first place in everything. For God was pleased to have all of his divine essence inhabit him," that is Jesus. "Through the Son, God also reconciled all things to himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven, thereby making peace through the blood of his cross." Now again, to be fair to the disciples, they had not yet seen the crucifixion of Jesus. They had not yet known about the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And they didn't have this passage from Colossians chapter 1 and the other passages in the New Testament that talk about who Jesus actually is and has been from the beginning. But you and I have that. We know that Jesus came and he put on flesh, though he's been ever existent with the Father and the Spirit. He's God. He put on flesh so that he could die for our sins, pay the penalty of our sins. And then he rose from the dead, showing that he has victory, not just over storms and everything else in creation, but he has victory over death. Even death couldn't keep him in the grave, which means if you're identified with Jesus, even death can't keep you in the grave. You're going to rise with him. So number one, we have Jesus who paid the penalty for all of our sins so that we don't have to. Number two, we have the resurrected Jesus who gives us the promise of the resurrection even after death. And number three, he's been there since the beginning. He's the creator. He is God over all of creation, even the wind, even the waves, anything that could possibly frighten us. That's who he is. And if you're a modern day disciple of him, again, that just means you're a follower of his. If you're a modern day disciple of his, he's in the boat with you. And it doesn't matter what's going on outside of the boat because he is Lord over all of that. We have absolutely nothing to be afraid of. That's what Jesus said. If you're his follower today, you can follow him without any fear. In fact, what he said to them at the very end was to have faith. Not to be afraid, but to have faith. If you think about it, fear and faith are kind of opposite things. If we're afraid, then we're not trusting, we're not having faith. But if we have faith in Jesus, we don't have to be afraid of anything, no matter what the rest of the world is doing, no matter what it may look like. He is Lord over all that creation. He's in that boat here with us. So our word for you today is to be a faithful follower, a faithful disciple of Jesus. He's God. He's got this. He's Lord over the storm. And if we really know who he is, we can live in faith and not fear. I'm Brian Norman. This is First AG Inverness. Thanks for watching.